I just saw a lecture or a talk that was being given by a number of people, and Rebecca Goldstien was sitting at the table, and she looked Hebel-ridden because she was she didn't look like, I don't know what they're talking about. You know, it sometimes happens. It's a philosophy thing. You know, if you get into this profession, you'll find yourself often at conferences. And it occurred to me one day, actually, when one of my professors arrived at a lecture that I was watching at Loyola University, and it happened to be Bernard McElroy, my Shakespeare professor, and I like Bernard McElroy a lot. McElroy, I've never quite known how to say it because he never really said his name to us, and I had a friend who took a class with him and he recommended him to me, and he really is quite good. He's so good that at Northern Illinois University Founders Memorial Library, they got 3 copies of his book, which is called Shakespeare's Mature Tragedies, and it's about King Lear, Hamlet, Macbeth, and the 4th mature tragedy, Othello. And it's a really, really excellent book that gave me insight prior to writing a master's thesis myself. I wrote only a master's thesis, which at Northern, Professor Gary Glenn of the Department of Political Science, when he brings it up to other students, I don't know what he says today, maybe he's low-key about it and he doesn't really mention my name anymore, but when he used to bring it up, you know, he'd say Jeff Newsel, he was essentially telling the students, he was saying, Jeff Newsel is a workaholic. He's not like other people here. When he sets out to do something, he goes overboard. You know, so maybe, not because I had written 111 pages for my MA thesis, which I personally thought, I fell short of really what should be required. I felt like if you're writing an MA thesis, it ought to be at least 100. You know, it should be 125. 135, and that's reasonable, because when I went to Loyola University in the first semester that I was there, I had Dr. Susan Measy for a professor, and Dr. Susan Measy stipulated that we were to write papers in the 20 to 25 page range. So I figured I'm writing the first semester I was there, I took Dr. Measy for 2 classes. And in each class, I had to write papers that were at least, I think, 18 pages. She specified 18 to 26 pages or so. And so I had written 50 pages, my first semester as an undergraduate student. So then I figured, well, if I'm a graduate student at NIU, then that's one half of what I wrote for an MA thesis. I was like, that's not enough, because I was able to work like a dog and write 50 pages that first semester. These papers were on different topics. One was on the topic, since writing is so important to people in the university, and no matter what you do, you're going to write a lot if you're an academic. Now, I don't think today there's as much writing going on. I bet if I were to analyze the data and I would start looking at how many pages were published by this professor between 1986 and 2006, and I would start comparing in the university, I would find that prior to the desktop computer coming into being, that people prior to that they were writing a lot more. See? Which is odd, because you think, well, you got a computer now. Why aren't you writing and publishing more than you were before? So I tried to explain this for a long time. And I had, for a number of years, I've been thinking about how different changes take place in technology. Like how it is that we go from, at one point, having the phonograph and having records on the phonograph, and then to going to having 8-track tapes, and then cassette tapes, and then the video cassette recorder, and then after the video, then CDs. See, where people can go and move right to what they want. You know, how selective that was. But you could do that with an 8-track tape. You could move to exactly the track you wanted to listen to. And if you had a special cassette recorder, it had a thing where you could push the button and then it would make this really squeaky sound, like, and it would search between the songs. And so it would get you to the next song. But that was hard to do. Like if you didn't hear it and you didn't stop it right away, it'd go rush right into the other song. And so then you go back and you had to listen for that sound. And it was really quite annoying. But so CDs, once they came up with CDs, that was the most logical thing of all. And now they have an even more logical thing, iTunes or whatever however service you use to buy tunes. You can make your own albums today. And they're not even called albums anymore. But I insist on the old 70s language. It dates me. But, it's the only thing that dates me. So it's kind of, I like that because it's the only thing that dates me. It's pretty good, but I kind of tried to fathom in my mind, like what kind of, so there's people out there that produce technology. And so they're changing from this technology to that technology to this technology. It's like you can see a parallel in automobiles. They go from they go from the 6-cylinder to the 8-cylinder, the 4-cylinder to the, then they got the Dodge Viper. That thing was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was a 12-cylinder motor, I think. But that was rare. It was only one Dodge Viper. There wasn't a lot of other 12 or 10-cylinder motors. But that was 10 to 12 cylinders. I never got to test drive one. I'm not shy about test driving vehicles. In the past when I had a license, I could do it. And I'm not shy about it. I go to a dealer, and if I'm in the market or if I need to know about a car. If I need to know how does this car run, I want to get behind the wheel and I want to feel it. So for years I had never test driven a muscle car, but I'm a leadfoot. I love going fast in a car. So one day I did go over to the dealership and I test drove a Mustang. I took the Mustang out and I spun down Alpine with it. It's a really beefy Mustang, and I really enjoyed that ride. But I by no means limit myself to those kinds of cars or even to that kind of vehicle, the ones with 4 wheels. I will go into a motorcycle shop and I will take a motorcycle out and test drive it too. It's nicer when you test drive a motorcycle because you don't have to deal with anybody coming with you. And you got that thing to yourself. So, if you're someone who has always had to test drive a car and you always had the guy always had, or the woman always had to sit with you, go out and test drive a motorcycle. And you have a right to. If you have a license and you have that classification of the motorcycle driver, you can go out and test drive any one you want. And you just tell them, hey, I'm interested in buying this motorcycle or some motorcycle here, and I'm not going to buy any motorcycle from you. This is the first thing you tell them. You tell them, I'm here to look at motorcycles. I may buy one of them. And if you want to sell one of them, you're going to be letting me test drive some motorcycles here. Don't be shy about asking, because you're going to spend $8,000 to $25,000. So why shouldn't they let you test drive it? There's no reason. And so you just make clear to them that if your sales pitch is not going to be successful unless I get to ride a motorcycle. And that's how you should be about it. That's just standing up for yourself as a consumer. It's just reasonable. Because it's like when I went over to the Harley Davidson dealer here, and they started getting all the sales pitch out, and you like this one, you like that one, you like that one. And I was like, yeah, I like a lot of these, and I'll be test driving some of them today. So then, then the person's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to do some work with this customer. Because then they get this thing out, and they copy your license on a piece of paper. You give them your license, and they copy it on a piece of paper, and then they have to have you sign this thing that says basically, if you get mangled on this machine, we're not responsible. Now come on. In reality, that piece of paper doesn't really mean much. You can still sue them later, but it seems to be that way. They feel protection when they make you sign that thing. It's by no means, it doesn't protect them. Your lawyer might sue them later. So that I was going back to that look that Rebecca had on her face at the table, because everybody was talking about some issue in philosophy. And sometimes we get this feeling. I was beginning to think about it earlier tonight when my friend and I were talking about how it is that everything's so confused today, And I think she was just the look on her face was just like, I'd like to be in a community of people where we share some agreement about discourse, and about what we're talking about, and about how we feel in discuss. Because there's some settings in which you have unity. Like one thing about if you start a motorcycle club with a few other people, you're gonna have agreement, because you're all gonna start out with we love motorcycles. See, now that's something and whenever you find disagreement seeps in, you're in the motorcycle club. Even if Jeff Newsel right now, even if I ironically started a motorcycle club of philosophers, and I just said, hey, we're just like, these are just philosophers who are interested in motorcycles. And that's what we are. Some of them would be philosophers who don't yet have motorcycles. Some of them would be philosophers who are not driving presently. Some of them would be philosophers who are seeking to get their license as a motorcyclist, and some of them would be full-fledged motorcycle drivers. I know one thing about this club, that it would exclude the ones who are not willing to be high throttle towards death. See, so it would exclude those guys right away, that they wouldn't be there. And some of the females today in philosophy might be attracted to this kind of thing, like a philosophy club. So it's philosophizing, but it's motorcycle riding. Motorcycle riding is a very peaceful thing. It is a surprisingly peaceful thing. It has kind of this tough kind of sentiment behind it, where you're kind of you're more manly if you ride a motorcycle. It's a machine. See, it's a machine. So people are like, you know how to operate machines. You might not know how to operate any other machine in nature. You might not know anything about a lathe. You might not know anything about, running the generators over at Byron Nuclear Plant. You might not know anything about any machine in modern manufacturing, but you can run that machine. And it's a nice thing, because if you know how to run or operate a single machine, then you can kind of generalize your knowledge to all machines, every machine. But let's go back just for the last 10 seconds to why do the technologies change so frequently? Why doesn't something of stability stick with one or other of the machines? Something like a reflection on technology is what we're trying to do.